Finally, we've made it to FNAF 3, the end of the trilogy, and you'd think things are only going to get simpler now. We only have one funny little guy hunting us down, not including the hallucinations brought on by the PTSD and trauma of our past, but also one less night than the other games, and today we're going to be taking a retrospective deep dive into 5 Nights at Freddy's 3. But first, we need to get some background information laid down. Now to begin with, the game released on the 2nd of March 2015, being 4 months after the second game. Yes, Scott used to be a damn factory with this franchise, even after claiming FNAF 1 would be his very last game. But the main things you need to know is that this game takes place quite a while after FNAF 1, being estimated to be around 30 years. Now this isn't confirmed in the game, so we're going to discard this for our timeline that we're putting together in this series. Now we're going to talk about the teasers that were released in the lead up to this game, starting on January 3rd. We got our first look at Springtrap, accompanied with the text, "I am still here." Now, I remember this teaser coming out and everyone assumed this was some kind of Golden Freddy, something like that. But as we now know, it was Springtrap. Now the next teaser shows us the toy animatronics in the box, which later ends up in the office. Now, this actually confirms a plot point from our FNAF 2 retrospective a few weeks ago, which you'd definitely watch if you have not already. Now, the next teaser is just a black image with the text "he always does," which is a reference to Springtrap never fucking dying, like ever, but is also referring to the earlier teaser of Springtrap. Then the final 3 teasers are less important and show us Phantom Balloon Bitch, Foxy, and Chica for the very first time. However, on the same day as the Balloon Boy teaser, Scott just straight up released FNAF 3 out of the blue. But now that you're all caught up to the release of 5 Nights at Freddy's 3, I think it's time we get into the actual retrospective, shall we? Let's begin. So to start, let's talk about some context for the game, starting with our characters. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we only have one real animatronic that can kill us, which is Springtrap, accompanied by our PTSD in the form of the Phantom animatronics, who all take inspiration from their FNAF 2 counterparts, with Freddy being Withered Golden Freddy and in Chica instead being a classical rendition. And the last important bit of information you need to know is that the location of FNAF 3 is a horror attraction, which explains the weird layout of the building. But now we can get on to talking about the actual gameplay, so let's get straight into it. Now to start with, sadly for this video I could not find the AI values for Springtrap specifically, but what I could find is this. Now what you're seeing on screen is Springtrap's movement formula, which makes no sense to you right now, but me and my -1 brain cell are going to try and explain what the hell this is. So basically, the top line of this calculation means it just runs every second. Now for context, every night in this game is 5 minutes and 48 seconds, meaning this runs 348 times every single night. Then the move counter will go up every second and be compared to your AI value, which is a higher number every single night and determines how difficult it's going to be to deal with an animatronic. Now, the aggressive factor is 9 times out of 10 at 0, but will increase if one of these 4 things happen, which are a phantom jump scare, ventilation error, or being idle in the office for more than 10 seconds if the time is at 4 AM and above. Now, the total turns value decides where he gets to go, but for this to work we have to sum up the AI value, aggression factor, the RNG number, total turns, and compare it to the move counter, which must be greater than this sum, which decides the time intervals for Springtrap to move. But now that we've got the technical stuff out of the way, we can just move on to night 2, because in night 1 literally nothing happens, like at all. But to start, we have 2 of our phantoms active, being Balloon Bitch and Mango. Now all 3 of these characters are on an AI value of 2, but I'm going to recap how these guys actually work, starting with Balloon Bitch, who will randomly pop up on one of the cameras, with this occurrence becoming more common when the audio devices are used and in later nights as well. Now to combat him, just switch cameras very quickly and close the camera, which should just get rid of him. But if you're too slow and he jump scares you, he will deactivate your ventilation system. Whereas Mangle will randomly appear on cam number 4 specifically and play a very loud glitchy static sound whilst disabling all audio devices, hence forcing you to restart it. But that's all for night 2, here's another look at the AI values and let's go to night 3. Now on night 3 everybody is on an AI level of 3 and we get 3 new characters added to the roster, being Foxy, Chica, the Watermelon, and Freddy. Now as I did last night, let's explain these characters. Starting off with Foxy, who can appear randomly on the left side of your office and is stopped by pulling up the camera, but if you fail to do this in time he will jump scare you and break the ventilation systems, forcing you to restart it. Next up we have Freddy, who will occasionally start walking across your window in front of your office. Now you have to pull up your camera within 5 seconds of him walking across, otherwise he will jump scare you, which puts off the audio system yet again. And then lastly we have Chica, who will randomly appear on the arcade screen in cam number 7, which will just kind of be a face with a bright smile. So if you see this, very quickly switch cameras, otherwise she will jump scare you and break your ventilation system. Now the key strat here is to just completely avoid this camera completely so you don't encounter her at all. But that is all for night 3, here is your last look at the AI values before we move on to night 4, which adds our final animatronic to the mix and has everyone an AI value of 4. Now this final character is the Phantom Puppet and I explain him right now. Now to begin with, he will occasionally pop up on cam 08. Now if you see him, simply change the cameras and he'll go away. But if you don't, then he will pull your camera down and stare intently into your soul, which restricts you checking the monitor or maintenance panel, which in later nights can be an actual death sentence. Now that's all for night 4, here's your AI values yet again, but moving on to night 5, we get a continue in the pattern of AI values being the same as the night number. So everyone is at an AI level of 5 with the added bonus of event error every 8 seconds, and audio error every 2 uses, which is kind of difficult to deal with, but then we have our very last challenge, which is called Nightmare Mode, aka this game's night 6, where everybody's on an AI value of 7 and the other challenges are the exact same with an added video error every 24 seconds. But that is practically everything you need to know in terms of gameplay for Five Nights at Freddy's 3, so I guess we can move on to discussing the lore now. But very quick shill, if you are enjoying the video then make sure to like and subscribe as these videos do take time to make, so it'd be greatly appreciated, but thank you and back to the video. So as I do in all of these videos, we're going to cover the lore that's hidden in this game, as well as some extra things that I found kind of cool in the game. But first let's lay out how I'm going to do this. So first we're going to look at the Phone Man and his dialogue, then the environmental clues before we have the main course, the minigames, and for dessert, well, we have our finest timeline, topped with some delightful striker rambling. So without further ado, let's begin. To start with, we have two different characters who we will dub the Phone Dude and our classic Phone Guy, who shows up in the form of pre-recorded messages because, well, you know, he's dead. But back to the Phone Dude dialogue, he states that Fazbear's Frights is using real unauthentic stuff from old restaurants, like the Foxy Heads, Chica Heads, the Bonnie and Freddy torsos as well, to make the attraction more authentic, but haven't found any working animatronics as of the first night. But when we get to night 2, he is really excited about them finding a real animatronic in one of the old safe rooms. With the help of someone who apparently works in one of the old buildings, this leads him to discover an old, decrepit animatronic, aka Springtrap. Now with the Phone Guy dialogue, he mostly covers past events over at old Freddy's locations, which we will cover now. To start with, there used to be 2 suits that double as not only an animatronic, but also a wearable costume for employees. And these costumes were used at older locations, and are dubbed these Springtrap suits. And these are attracted to noise, however we are told this technology is incredibly volatile and can be dangerous if not used carefully. We have too much moisture or heat being able to set off the spring locks, which can have disastrous consequences for the employee inside of the suit. Also, the location these were being used in is still called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, likely being the first Freddy's location that we heard about in FNAF 2. Now moving on, each Freddy's Pizzeria has a secret safe room that is completely invisible to the cameras as well as the map layout and is hidden from all security systems, animatronic and customers. There was an incident in this location involving multiple simultaneous spring lock failures, which led to these suits being retired and deemed unsafe for employees to be wearing. And until replacement suits can arrive, there is a set of temporary costumes that have been provided for use. And lastly, the safe rooms were still kept open for the storage of equipment and other property, along with being a safe room for employees only. And then the last couple things of note is that there was an incident of customers being led into the back room, leading to an announcement from the company to, well, not do that in the future, and that the Spring Bunny costume has been moved for some odd reason before the safe rooms are abruptly sealed up, causing anything stirring there to be locked away forever. Now in terms of Phone Guy lore, that's pretty much it. Now it's time to move on to the environmental clues. Hidden throughout the environment of this game, there are many often neglected and ignored details that I want to point out in this segment. Now some of these have lore significance, whereas others don't, and to begin with I want to mention the toy animatronic box found in the main office, which aligns with what Phone Guy said in the last game about them being scrapped. Unless obviously hidden in some of the camera screens, you can find the original 4 animatronics spread out around the building, and similar to their toy counterparts lack their endos, instead just being the suits themselves. Now this next thing is not really to do with the environment, but in the game we can occasionally be attacked by the phantom animatronics, and these are just hallucinations and all resemble their FNAF 2 counterparts, with both Chica and Freddy being standouts here, as Chica represents her FNAF 1 classic appearance and Freddy is Withered Golden Freddy instead of regular Withered Freddy or classic Freddy. Then you can also encounter the puppet from Five Nights at Freddy's 2, who will randomly appear in Cam 08 when the phantom puppet is primed to attack, and rarely in your office you get this shadowy Golden Freddy-esque animatronic who will appear, however he does absolutely nothing. And then And our final environmental clue is the newspaper you get right at the end of the week, which once you brighten up this image, you can actually see Springtrap behind the Freddy bobblehead, and that is practically all there is hidden in the environment. But now this just leaves one more thing to talk about, which are the mini-games. Now we get to move on to the mini-games, which is where we get a decent chunk of the lore, and I first want to get these secret mini-games out of the way. And for context, in these mini-games, the gameplay isn't really important, instead the messages are where it really matters here. Now, all of these secret mini-games all involve us collecting cake and bringing it to dead children, which eventually culminates in the Happiest Day minigame where all the children come together alongside the puppet and their souls are put to rest, resulting in the good ending, where these souls are set free from the original 4 animatronics. Of course, there are other characters that are completely unrecognisable to us up to this part of the series. Other than those, there are a few notable parts in these minigames, and these important bits are the following. A minigame called Stage 01, where you play as Fredbear in a small room with only himself and Spring Bonnie on the stage. The prerequisite minigame to Happiest Day, where you play as Shadow Bonnie, warping between each individual level to give a child some cake. But now that we've taken some time to discuss these secret minigames, it is time that we cover the minigames that occur at the end of each and every single night. Now, all of these are simple and similar in premise, where we play as one of the original cast of animatronics, being Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, Chica, as we make our way around a restaurant that is pretty similar to the FNAF 1 game in its layout, and we are led throughout this restaurant by Shadow Freddy until we reach a room where the purple guy runs out and dismantles us. And this will go on every single night until all of the animatronics are completely dismantled. However, it is worth noting that when it comes time to play as Foxy, the animatronic suit is not damaged, which essentially means this minigame likely takes place before FNAF 1. Then in the 5th and final of these minigames, we play as one of the dead children, and have to scare the purple guy into the back room where the old yellow bunny costume resides. He puts it on to try and hide and begins laughing, but I think we all know what happens next. Yep, that's right. All of this movement causes the suit to go into a spring lock failure, which actually kills the purple guy, which eventually leads to the rise of Springtrap, and with that there is not much more to the minigames. And there's notably less content here than in FNAF 2, but you've got to keep in mind that this was supposed to be the end of the series, and Scott was trying to wrap up his original story. But obviously, those plans changed, and now let's get right into the big meat and potatoes of this series, the timeline. So, as I have done in the previous 2 episodes of this retrospective series, we're going to be creating our very own timeline. And as you can see here, I've recreated the timeline exactly as it was at the end of our FNAF 2 video. Now remember the colours in the backgrounds, all browns represent FNAF 1, blue is for FNAF 2, and our new green tiles are for FNAF 3. Now it is worth mentioning that this game contains 2 different endings, being the good ending where the lights in the animatronic masks are no longer lit up, and the bad ending where they still are and Golden Freddy is visible. And just for the sake of our timeline later on, I'm going to be plastering the good ending at the very end, but obviously this is going to be subject to change as of the next video. Now then, what new stuff can we add to our old timeline? Well, first we need to go back to the beginning and we can update Fredbear's to be our new version, which we saw in the Stage 01 minigame, and it can be implied that any location pre-FNAF 2 likely used springlock suits, and they were likely retired after the first Freddy's location due to the springlock failures spoken about in the phone guy calls. And my main reason for this conclusion is that if you look at all the animatronics in FNAF 2, none of them are springlocks, except maybe the Wizards, but that's a theory for another day, and we don't really have concrete proof other than the fact these suits come from an older location before FNAF 1, 2 and 3, and are also used for parts on the toy animatronics. Now moving on further into our timeline, we know that the old springlock suits after their retirement were required to be stored safely at remote locations to be looked at by technicians. Now, although we don't know where the real physical Golden Freddy suit, as the one we see in the games, is obviously a hallucination of some kind, as he kind of, teleports all over the gaff. But we do know Spring Bonnie will eventually end up in the FNAF 1 safe room where Purple Guy is later springlocked. And here's where things in our timeline can get a little bit messy. So it's stated by Phone Guy that the springlock suit was likely the Bonnie one that becomes Springtrap was being moved. And some customers were led into the back room, meaning that this event likely relates to one of the 2 MCIs that we've talked about in the previous 2 videos. And how we understand the timeline, it must have happened at the pre-FNAF 2 Freddy's. However, in a later call he tells us that most of the safe rooms are being boarded up, which means that the Purple Guy had to have been springlocked before the back rooms were all boarded up, and that he must have been around present during FNAF 2. Of course, to perform the second string of murders. Now it is possible that my interpretations have been wrong so far, possibly, but there are way too many implications that the MCI CGI already took place during FNAF 2. One major example of this being the smell that came off of the withered animatronics as described in the Night 2 phone call in FNAF 2. And for some strange reason, people still have a negative impression of the company. Why do people have this impression? Well, a group of kids going missing would explain this incredibly well, and the bodies never being found would explain why and how Freddy's is still around, and why last piece of evidence is the Save Them minigame, where we can actually see withered Golden Freddy and withered Freddy moving around the pizzeria, and in my opinion, this could be a result of one of either two things. One, a retcon in the story has occurred, or the story has been poorly communicated on this front, which FNAF veterans would know is not uncommon with this franchise at all. Now my copium for this is that our timeline as of right now is correct, and we don't need to move the MCI or anything, but there may be a little bit of a time jump between some of the calls in FNAF 2, specifically Night 5 and 6, otherwise our timeline would get just completely fucking unraveled by the seams. And with that heaping mess cleaned up, we can talk more about our delicious timeline. And we can add the fact that Spring Bonnie was most likely the mascot, so it used to lure kids into the back room. Now I believe the Happiest Day minigame shows us the results of the FNAF 2 MCI incident, as we can see not only our original cast of characters, but also another set of characters wearing completely unrelated masks. Obviously in the FNAF's more modern era, this is definitely theorized to be the mediocre melodies, but obviously we don't know anything about that as we're not using anything from the future, anything from the books in this timeline. But on a side note, these kids do look more lively, and my personal explanation for this is that they are not angry like the others. We know that our main crew of souls are aggressive towards night guards mainly because of Purple Guy, and these souls are angry and want revenge. That's why they're grey coloured, compared to the coloured ones who are sat at their table who already have cakes and have likely moved on. Now moving even further forward in our timeline, we can finally put the incident that put Foxy out of order, which is the Follow Me minigame, where Foxy was dismantled as this likely damaged the suit, and due to the lack of parts of him in the back room and parts and service, we can assume this is why he's literally never repaired. So Foxy is destroyed in FNAF 1 just before the Springblock incident, with the Purple Guy in the back rooms being sealed then. The FNAF 1 classic animatronics are scrapped completely, with the endos being lost to time as we have no idea where they are, and the old suits being left in storage, later to be reused in the FNAF 3 building. And now we can skip around 30 years forward in our timeline from FNAF 1's closure to 2023, when Fazbear Frights opens up to the public. Then we have the discovery of the Springtrap costume and the game's actual gameplay. Then not too long after the gameplay occurs, the Fazbear's Frights building burns to the ground as shown in the newspaper, resulting in the Happiest Day at the very end of our timeline. And as a whole, this is the very end of our timeline and our very first supposed end to the series. Now what questions remain? So Five Nights at Freddy's was the supposed end of the series at the time, but oh how wrong that was proven in the near future. But this fact means that most of the story's loose threads were completely wrapped up, bearing a couple of things that we even don't know now in the year of 2024. But of course, as is the rule with this series of retrospectives, I can only go off information available up to this game in the series so far. Away are the days of robot children and giant mega malls. There's the second set of MCI kits we learned about in the last video, plus the shadow animatronics as well, which my personal theory is that these guys are the souls of workers who died in the multiple Springlock failures brought up by the phone guy on Night 4. Of course, we don't have any new information about the Bite of 87 culprit either, leaving that as another big mystery hanging in the balance. Then our very last thing is, what actually are the phantoms? And my personal theory is that they are a result of the night guard's fear, or they are the angry spirits of the dead children that remain in the restaurant. But that's all for the remaining questions for this game. Now it's time for my general thoughts and ratings of this game in the series. Alright, so Five Nights at Freddy's 3, however good it is for the FNAF lore, is easily my second least favourite game in the entire series, just because of how boring and repetitive the gameplay is. Every phantom is dealt with in the exact same way, which is just flip the camera down, and Springtrap overall is way too easy to deal with, as if you have more than 3 brain cells you can just keep him at the top of the map for the entire night, making the game overall kind of boring and repetitive, which coming from FNAF 2, which even now is still one of the most innovative games in the entire franchise with all of its mechanics. Yes, a lot of the characters there use a similar system to be dealt with, but there are so many factors to think about, which makes the game somewhat of a challenge, which for me FNAF 3 doesn't really have, making it get a 5 out of 10 rating from me, as it is just carried by the atmosphere, mini-games and the general lore inside the game, but everything else is a massive letdown. The jump scares are meh, the animatronic designs are realistically just some of the wizards and toys with a watermelon filter on them, so for me this is one of the weakest in the entire series. Okay, so that is going to be all for today's retrospective. If you did enjoy, then make sure to like and subscribe. Now I'm going to ramble for just a couple of moments about what I'm doing next here on the channel, so let's begin. Now I do actually have a lot of exams coming up, so the big boy videos like this one will be more spaced out, and I'll have more collab videos on the way over the next few weeks alongside some small FNAF game retrospectives. Here's a list of the few that I'm looking to put out over the next couple of weeks. A video covering Super FNAF, which we actually played a good while ago here on the channel, a video on Ultra Custom Night, then some other random videos like other stuff on FNAF hoaxes, recolors, troll games and other stuff like that. But fret not, viewers, the next big retrospective is finally coming soon. Bendy and the Dark Revival is finally getting its retrospective video months after my last video on Bendy and the Ink Machine, so make sure to be excited and prepared for that. I also have some One Idiot Versus videos. I have now officially completed all 3 of the Undertale main endings, so that video is now in the works. Then I also have started on my big Halloween video, which I'll give out more details on later. Then lastly, if you want more updates, then join the Discord, links on screen and in the description right now. But if you did enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more epic Striker content, and I'll see you all next time. Striker out.